Yeah. That's for the line and like. You know, it's
We did that actually.
so I just love it. I love it. Here's Christian. Right. So his live stream is just through. Follow, walk around the room and we're going to go ahead and get started. Where I know I apologize, we're running just a little bit late here. I wasn't sure if there's going to be an intro or not. So this, first, I just want to make sure that I thank you for all of your time here, because it's great to see a lot of people here that are supporting the community. We've done some work. Our firm, let me introduce myself, Andy Howard with Hitchcock Design Group. One of our founders, Rick Hitchcock, had been involved a little bit in some of the earlier studies with the riverfront and everything in Ottawa. I specialize in recreation, so I've been working with Hitchcock Design Group for a landscape architecture and land planning firm. Going on, let's see, 96, so close to 27, 28 years. I'm doing the math right, but over 25 years. We specialize in recreation and amenities, whether that be along the riverfront, community parks, neighborhood parks. We also do comp planning services. We're looking at the overall park areas, whether that be a recreation department or a parks department within a city, or village or a park district, which Illinois is unique to having park districts with different tax bodies to help with the park system here. But our goal tonight, and let me know if I'm speaking too loud or not loud enough, so just feel free, I'm pretty informal, raise your hand. But we want to gather your input tonight. This is a community input meeting. This is for out in the park, so hopefully everyone's in the right room. My daughter just started college, so sometimes you're not in the right spot, you have to go to the room next door, but it's a whole other story. But a lot of it's history here, obviously. Part of this process is that there's a great grant program. Hopefully you've heard of it. It's called the Auguss program. It's a mouthful. It's open space, land, and development acquisition grants. So it's for development of parks, and there's also a separate grant program for acquiring property. As of right now, we've been hired to work with the city of Ottawa for the Auguss grant program, which that deadline is coming up fairly quickly. September 29th is when all the grants need to be submitted. The good news is this is one of the historic, the amount of pool of money that's available is $56 million is the pool of money that's available for the Auguss grant program. This is all public knowledge. It's dedicated funding through the state of Illinois that's administered through the IDNR, or the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. We have grant administrators that receive all of these grants, review them, and have a system that they kind of vet through in order to decide where the grant funding would go. This year they've increased the bucket of money, so it's a 50-50 grant matching program. So $1.2 million is the maximum amount, so it's a $600,000 to $600,000 match. So the community had $600,000, they would match it $600,000, or if it was an $800,000 project, it would be $400 and $400. So that's the goal of this grant program. We're developing what's called a site development plan or concept plan. Everything that you see here is not set in stone. This is again conceptual, but we need to make sure that we're looking at the cost, what's in the program. The DNR administrators want to have a variety of different facility types or recreation amenities, if you will. So trying to cater to as many user types that might come down to the park and recreate. That's the goal. So with that, I just wanted to kind of give some preface as to the purpose of our engagement with the city of Ottawa. Again, our firm has prepared Auguss grants for 15, 20 years. We have a great track record of securing the funding. It's not, obviously 100%, but we have secured a lot of funding over the years with recreation clients. I'm going to try to keep this fairly brief, which is hard for me, but about 10 15 minutes. I've already know you used 5 minutes up there, but I thought it was just important to at least ground us on why we're here. This is a community input meeting, so the grant administrators really encourage us, and I think it's very important too, to engage the community. You are the users of this park. You have the history of the park. You may have some good history. You may have some history that's a while back that, this can do better, this can do better, or we'd like to see this here. We're here to get your input. Our goal here is to really understand what your thoughts are for the park a little bit, but also ground it in a concept plan, which we'll show after this. Afterwards, if you get a chance, feel free to come up here and look at these boards. We're going to just kind of go over them briefly for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. My understanding is this is from 7 to 8:30, not that we have to take an hour and a half, but we are here to stay as long as you need to answer any questions and have some dialogue. With that, we're just going to dive right in. The base map, obviously, everyone's familiar with Allen Park. We've got, is it Hit Road or Courtney? There's a couple things I'm looking online. It's like Courtney Drive, Hit Road, and then there was a Hiawatha, like 3 different names on Google Earth Pro. It was like a third one. So anyway, what's the official name of the? Okay, there we go. So we got Hit Street. A lot of topography changes here. The main thing here to look at, and everyone is familiar with it, is we all know that it floods. It's in a floodway, in a floodplain. That is a great use for park planning, to be honest. Several of our parks are within river corridors, within ponds that might have wetlands or some flooding issues. Now there's certain restrictions that would go along with that, but again, it's a great use, and also it's a great use to be able to have those kind of views and interaction with the Illinois River. Obviously, the main access is coming off this road here. There's an existing path coming in. Just to orient everyone when we're looking at the maps, this is the floodway, this straight line. Basically, what that means is that's basically where the river flows. That when it gets a little bit higher and is flooding, that's where most of the water movement is. So there's some more severe restrictions in the floodway, which means you can't put any kind of structures or buildings or other type of solid blocks of material like buildings, because then what that does is that takes up room and then it causes flooding downstream. So there's a lot of big permitting challenges. So obviously, you're not going to be putting any kind of restrooms or buildings or anything within that floodway towards the Illinois River. The second piece of that is the floodplain. It's a little bit hard to see, but it kind of undulates a little bit. You can see with this topo change here, I think the restrooms are right here. But the floodway, the floodplain, comes in kind of right next to the backside of those existing restrooms that are there. What that means is, it's called a 100-year flood plain, but we know that it doesn't flood every 100 years. It's just a terminology as far as that they have to give it, I guess. So sometimes they'll flood 3 times, 4 times in 1 year, then you may not get it but once another year, but it seems like it's becoming more frequent, which is why a lot of the times they're remapping some of the river corridors. So with that, we're looking at some different amenities. I know there was a playground that was here that was removed. I'm not sure exactly what year, but there's certain amenities that we want to make sure that we're putting back into the grant program. So a playground, they want to see at least kind of 5 different types of amenities. Playground is one of those. A small shelter near the playground in order to provide some shade. But we're looking at kind of a gaming area. Not a multimedia gaming area with headphones and all that stuff, but that's what most people think of. But it's an outdoor gaming area where you might have maybe outdoor table tennis or maybe some beanbag toss games that are more the precast concrete. We've done these in a lot of parks. Obviously, whatever goes out here has to take that outdoor environment or be vandal resistant and very kind of durable. Another thing that we're looking at is kind of fitness stations. The idea of maybe a fitness loop or a pod where you might have some fitness stations. And so let's go to the next plan here. I'm just going to kind of walk you through this a little bit. So coming down off the main entry, you've got some parking here on your main drive. This concrete walk we know has been installed recently, I think within the last year or so, I believe. So you've got the nice walk that goes by the existing statue, chief standing, proud sculpture right in here. But what we don't have is kind of a walking trail or a walking loop. So one thing that the DNR likes to see is the ability to be able to have kind of a walking trail or walking loop. So one thing we're looking at is the idea of making some connections. There's a walkway here that could use some repair a little bit, but also making ADA access connections to the existing shelter. So we would have again, more likely a concrete walk because it's more durable in the floodway and floodplain. This is outside of the floodplain. So coming through here, you have a series, the ability to walk these loops and then a larger loop here. So that provides a little bit more of a, both ADA access to the shelters and also kind of a loop path. And then the amenities over here near this existing shelter, this would be where the game tables, the game area would be. Again, some of the precast concrete game tables.
All right, let me try and blow it up a little bit.
Oh, thank you. So we've got the outdoor.
Maybe not. I guess it doesn't like that.
Outdoor table tennis. Some game tables that would have basically a checkerboard pattern, so you can come out and play chess or checkers. It's also just used as kind of a standard kind of picnic table, so again, it doesn't have to function as a game table, but it gives you an opportunity to have some of the games next to the shelter. There's already some kind of corporate level grills or some larger grills. We're looking at either repurposing those or maybe getting some new grills to be integrated near the shelters. And then coming over to this side, this would be the beanbag toss game. I'm from Indiana, so we call it cornhole. Have I heard that term before? Okay. There's actually different distances on some of that stuff. The bago is kind of a game that is more familiar in Illinois. But we have basically 4 courts here. We have some top images that we'll show after this. I know plan view is not the most exciting, but this gives you an opportunity to have some of the beanbag toss games next to the shelter, and then another 2 off with a couple benches. And then this becomes the hub coming off of this walkway. This is going to be a little bit of the challenge, is that you have the existing walkway coming up the slope here. Right now, the survey information from GIS is indicating around a 5 to 6% slope, but we have some opportunities to widen this pathway, and actually, because this is pretty flat in here, come in and cut a little bit in order to maintain a 5% or less slope. That's the key slope for ADA access. If it's 5% or less, you don't need a handrail. If it gets between kind of that 5% and 8.33%, that's considered a ramp. And then from an ADA accessibility standpoint, that would implement or require a handrail. We want to keep it at 5% or less because we want to keep it clean and not having kind of handrails that kind of mar the landscape. Then coming out to this area, you do have some flat zones. This is a great walk. It's obviously everyone knows. It's got a lot of history with some of the artwork, being able to look at the sculptures that mimic some of the bridge architecture. I think, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think if I have it labeled, one of them is the bending sculpture and one of them is the reclining sculpture. So, and I'm interested to talk a little bit more about that after the meeting too, but some great nods to history and some great artwork and sculptures within that space. This would be the fitness area, so kind of 3 pods with some fitness stations. We'll look at some images of that as well. There are some memorial benches out here that we'd be looking at still keeping and relocating in a few areas. And then coming to the main hub, which has the large shelter, grill, restrooms. I think the plan is that the stairs right there are kind of in a little bit of disrepair. And so we're looking at making sure that gets redone as far as the stairs, maybe some handrails. That might be part of the Osmond grant or maybe coming prior to that. It's still in discussion with the city. But this will be a direct access. This will be your ADA accessible route. And then really have an opportunity with some embankment play. Coming up these stairs, you've got a nice slope in here. And so we're looking at the idea of using pour in place rubberized surfacing. So a lot of actually they was just put in at Thornton Park would be an example of that. If you've been over there, that's the pour in place rubberized surfacing. It doesn't flow away, so that when it does kind of flood up in this area, it's not as much of a maintenance consideration for the city, so it's easier to maintain. But you're able to get some slopes with some embankment slides, some different type of play opportunities here. Small shade structure, again, to provide some shade next to the playground. And then some other pieces that we'll look at, some ideas, but some they've really come a long way with some climbing type of applications, and we're calling this kind of a river and flow theme. The play equipment itself is not decided, but we have to come in with kind of a preliminary layout plan and some ideas for the grant. You're not totally locked into that, but it gives them a sense of kind of what you're proposing and then how much is allocated for that space. Also doing a little bit of embankment here, so you've got this slope here, flat area, shelter gathering area, flatter area, and then a little bit of a slope in this zone. You have some good bones as far as some existing trees in here, but to be honest, a lot of that is kind of scrub brush. You've got some mulberries, some there's some other ones, mulberries, buckthorn, of course. What's the boxelder? Sorry, I'm blanking on all these. But some of them that just aren't as desirable of a species. So we want to come in and selectively clear some of the invasives out, do some tree planting. I think the entire park probably could use kind of an idea of just replanting a few trees here and there, looking at natives that can take the flooding. So swamp white oak or sycamore, which could be a little bit weed, but not weed, but the river loving type plants. You want to make sure that we're looking at kind of a tree plan to say what's out there, what can we plant now, so that we're starting to grow some of these trees for the future, and also provide some shade for the playground. But really a great view, panoramic views back to the Illinois River. And then also through here we have a couple stations where S is at. And this is just a great place to stop and reflect and pause. So we're looking at proposing some swing benches. And these aren't the ones with the chain where you can come in and launch off of it. That's going to be more playground area. But something that has a little bit of a gentle rock to it, maybe a little bit of overhead arbor or an overhead post. And again, we'll have some images to share with you for that. And then restrooms would stay where they're at. And then coming through to W, we'd be doing an overlook. Right now there's some flagstone paving, which showing some signs of decay, a little bit of cracking here and there, a little bit harder to maintain with the joints in between. So from that standpoint, we're looking at trying to get maybe more of a durable material. We also have some examples of like stained concrete, so looking at concrete or ways we can do decorative paving there in order to kind of tell the story. So that would be W, kind of more of a council ring as well, so some low seawalls. One thing that we'll see too is that the existing structure, which is over in here, there's some stone veneer, some columns on the existing shelter down near the river. Is picking up some of that stone and bringing that in here with some seawall. So the more we can repeat some of the materials that are on site, the more aesthetic and more congruent everything's going to be. So that stone is kind of timeless, and we already have that history with like I think it was the WPA project maybe in order to repeat that material elsewhere on site. And then of course, this is kind of known also kind of as an art and sculptural walk. We want to maintain that kind of history and heritage. And so the more that we can come in and along this area, identify some areas where we might be able to put some additional new sculptures, but also make sure we're preserving the views and kind of the history of the reclining and the bending sculptural elements that give nods again to the bridge. It adds some nice color out there. It actually is pieces of previous bridges, is my understanding, that it's made of, and you've got the shapes that are in there that you can see on the other bridges, which I think is a really nice way to just learn about the history of Ottawa. And I know that there's a rich history here, obviously, and I want to make sure that we're looking at ways to preserve that. Other things that we might be able to take away from an interpretive standpoint is that there was, I think, a mineral springs out here that they used to bottle some of the water. And even online, like on eBay and other stuff, you could find some of the glass jars that you could purchase or be able to find that they found along this area. So the more we can kind of tell the story, I think the better. That can be done with an interpretive sign. It can be done in creative ways in order, again, just to kind of tell a history. I know there's a column down here too that kind of gives a nod to the mineral springs that was here. Let me make sure that I'm not. Oh, the other one thing is we want to make sure that it's natural too, so we have a little bit of a nature path. Underneath here, we want to look at using native plantings. The more that we can use native plantings that are established and don't require watering all the time is going to help with less maintenance. Using plants that might be like a pollinator garden, looking at maybe some idea of rain gardens where we might need some, be able to have some water filtration. So that would occur obviously as it's just sloping toward the river. Some of these areas, there's going to be some stone under here to allow the water to filtrate through, but as that goes through towards the river, some of these planting pocketed areas could be great spaces for, again, a small rain garden or kind of a pollinator garden. So I think we've covered everything on the plan. Again, just to reiterate, I'll open up for questions, is that we have the game tables, we've got the beanbag toss game, fitness stations. The main reason for the shift of the playground, again, is that we're trying to get it outside of the floodplain because of frequent flooding. And so the wear and tear of having it a little bit lower, that to nestle that back in here and get that outside of the flood zone is going to be a big benefit. But also, it also gives you some panoramic views and a little bit more of a reason to kind of come up and experience the an art sculptural walk, and then also have some places that are more passive in nature. Again, there's bench swings, the relocated memorial benches. And so I know that's a lot, and I'm going to stop there so I can open it up for questions. The timeline for this is that we're here to get your feedback, and so if we have some comment cards,
Yeah, we can pass them.
I know, Chris, maybe I think they're back here, but let's pass out the comment cards and then as you're thinking about that, as we're asking questions, the DNR really likes, first off, please sign in if you haven't, because they like to see that there's some community interest and input on the project. And they also, we do share a meeting summary of the comments. So they want to see kind of what the community is thinking, and some of the comments they have as well. We're going to summarize those, and all those go into the grant that the DNR administrator is going to look through. And so this is a very important process, and again, I appreciate everyone's time. If you have just 10 or 15 minutes after our stop, please jot down your comments, but I'm just going to open up to questions and answers. Some of the stuff that might be more fiscal related, I'll try to answer, but I might defer some of them with operations to the city.
My name is Patrick Fian, and I'm a 3-time Commodore of Star Rock Yacht Club and a 2-time Commodore of the Illinois River Basin Boating Association and 2-time Rear Commodore of the Lake Michigan Yachting Association. So I have a unique perspective from the water perspective. Your presentation so far was land-based. I'm going to ask that the committee, the city council, and all those attending remember that boating is an economic component that can help the Ottawa engine prosper. The wonderful additions you're saying and proposing here are great. What I'd like to propose is a way to bring money back to Ottawa and back to the merchants and the grocery stores and the hardware store, the churches, the barber shops, and all these things in town, because you can go from Mackinac to St. Louis. Ottawa is unique because you can boat to a town and you can walk just a couple of minutes. There's so many merchants, there's a wine festival, there's all these wonderful things that Ottawa has where other towns made their riverfront industrial. What I would ask the committee is to reflect on a possibility of a 100-yard straight line dock, not finger slips or finger docks that project out into the river, because that requires maintenance of workers taking them in and taking them out seasonal. This would be an all-season dock where boaters could come to Ottawa as a destination. There was a time where Starbuck Yacht Club had a Labor Day festival, and it was a Midwest destination where the governor of Michigan, the president of Evinrude Motors, and a 1930s actor named Pat O'Brien boated to Ottawa, and it was annual. And I'd like to see that happen again, where Ottawa is a destination with Shoreline Boat Club, with Whitewaters and Starbuck Yacht Club and Heritage Harbor. But if the city projects forward thinking, if there is a straight line dock there at an initial cost, but there wouldn't be an annual cost after that because it was already part of the project, but you would bring boaters in who would gladly come and spend money with the merchants, the restaurants, and all the things that they could walk into town or the wine festival. And with the Great Loop, so many boats come through Ottawa every year that's starting, and we're talking boats that are $400,000, $600,000, $800,000. People who would drop a couple $100s on a store or the Scarecrow Festival or some event like that, they would drop a couple hundred quicker than you or I would even think about, because if you got an $800,000 boat, you're going to Florida. What a nice day to come up and spend in Ottawa and spend money or go to church and, oh, I got to go to the post office. All these things are right there. So I'll just conclude by asking, these are wonderful, but please also think about perhaps including some sort of dockage to bring boaters and money that will help the merchants in town.
Real quick, on that note, I just want to make sure that clear on kind of our scope as well. I think there's a whole other planning effort as far as the riverfront goes. The OSLA grant program is really about recreation and amenities related to more land-based. There is a BAD grant or a boat acquisition and development grant that the DNR administration puts forward as well. So it's not that we're ignoring the riverfront, it's that the grant funding that's allocated and how it's described in the manual is specific to certain type of amenities. Now, I know they had put some shoreline improvements, I think, for some erosion control probably fairly recently with some of the riprap, but I think there is another larger planning effort. There might have been some previous efforts, and again, I'm not privy to all of the previous planning, but I do agree that there's an opportunity there from the river standpoint. I'm a kayaker, canoer myself. That's a lot smaller than the Page River. Most of the time it's dry and you have to kind of scrape bottom as opposed to the Illinois. But I do agree. I think there's opportunities for commerce and to bring more money into Ottawa from looking at it as far as where they might dock and where those might go, looking at that entire stretch. So I think it's a great comment, but it's like a different planning effort that would be part of a bigger master plan. That this is just kind of one phase of other stuff that could come down the road. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Yeah, Patrick, this is something we're probably looking at in the future. As you know, we've already done some work along Allen Park, and mainly the work we've done there is temporary somewhat because of safety reasons. We had to do that. I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with you totally that we are looking in the future of being able to do something along the riverfront there. And the idea of having boats come in, and I know as well as you do that these boats do spend a lot of money when they come to town. And that's something that we have to find a lot more money than a $400,000 grant. Because that whole riverfront, as far as the actual frontage on the water, is going to cost a lot more. But when we do that, that is a good idea to actually set, so we got places for people to park, come spend some money. They're going to go out for supper, they're going to go visit you guys, probably take a tour up and visit me up at Shoreline and that, but, it's a great idea.
I'd like to add too that we already have an architect and engineer that are working on fishing piers. So if you want to get us some additional information, they haven't finished anything yet, but I'm sure we can incorporate that. But it is separate from this grant.
Great topic, appreciate it. Yes.
So, there's a huge parking area down there, and at one time, Allen Park was the only place you could launch a boat, and now we have a nice facility upstream on the Allen River. We have the Fox River and a small one right across the river. And it seems like that parking is way, in my opinion, but I'm not sure, is excessive. And a lot of this is right up your drawing, so it's outside your scope of work, I understand, but I kind of like to get your opinion. If you look between the sculpture G and whatever D is, it looks like everything's really crowded there. And you'll see by G, at one time, the parking lot went all the way up to that sculpture, and we kind of kicked it out so that you'd have more green space. Yeah, like if you carried that over to the west, carry that gives you some additional room, things that aren't so squished in there, and you have additional green space in the area, but whatever it might be.
That's a great comment. When I was out there just the other day, right now it's just kind of striped off, and there's a few dumpsters in that area that I think could just look at a possible relocation. But if this is going to be kind of the hub of the main shelter restaurants coming in, kind of your front door access, is there an opportunity to be able to relocate some of those services away from that area, or even potentially eliminate a few parking spaces in order to give that back to green space? I think that's something that we can look at, and I guess look at the parking counts, see what's going to be there as far as, obviously when you build more of a destination type play area, the community, that's going to draw a lot of people. We've done some nature-based communities and playgrounds that, one in Chalmers that is tied to a nature center, and there's a lot of people that are coming, and you don't want to obviously plan for what I call the Christmas at Walmart parking lot, because most of the time it's only used once or twice for those big events. So I think that's a great comment. I think that's something we can take back and work with the city to ask, and I think Tammy mentioned at one of our site visits too, that they were looking at maybe trying to convert a few more parking spaces into green space. So we'll work with the city to see where that might make sense, but a very good comment. Yes, in the back?
I'm just gonna add on to that, if you do move the green space all the way over, it gets all congested really. I've spent a lot of years down there, and if someone's coming to use the shelter, they end up taking 2 or 3 spaces, and you've got people trying to get into the bathrooms and they can't, and then the dumpsters are there.
Right here.
Correct. It's a jammed up space that really, if you made it green, people would be able to park a little farther away. Maybe you could include a loop in that walking space that you're going to go around Yellow and make that a little more instead of just something stuck out there, and have a space for maybe a little more trees. And then it kind of takes on to a comment I had. Is there anything in the design for the dumpsters to go somewhere? This is a little, but they're big and ugly and they sit there. And people put a lot of dead fish in there. And I've been on a long time and it's kind of not attractive for as beautiful as this area is for the kids. So I don't know where that fits in any grants, but I back onto that. That's a great idea to maybe get a little more green there and spread it out for everybody to feel good.
Yeah, I would agree that this is gonna be your main hub as far as the restroom, the larger shelter, and then having access to the station and the ADA. So I think we can look, explore, even if you took a few, 4 or 5 spaces, you could come in and create a little bit more of a entry into that space. So I think that's a good comment, and it's something that we can work with the city again to see, at a minimum, maybe trying to find another place that the dumpster services are able to easily access, but maybe not as close to the shelter or the playground. Very good comments, and we'll incorporate that as we move forward with refining the plan. Again, this is a concept, so all these ideas are great ideas for us to discuss with the city. Yes?
Yeah, in that space, I wonder if a car, truck, and a boat on a trailer needs that space for negotiating too. That was just one thing, I think that's why it was so big back there. And then
What are we talking about for the,
coming off
for
the
this one
ramp,
here?
yeah, and then on when they park and all that stuff afterwards too. Yeah, are they still going to allow parking on one side of that road, do you think? Along H?
You mean along this stretch?
Yeah, I just wondered. You can park on one side now, is that right?
I'm not familiar with the parking regulations. Yeah, I know this is parked, and this is parked here, but I'm not sure along H whether there's parking allowed or not.
I think so. Parking's not gonna change along that roadway. Not with this plan anyway.
I think right now, I think the thought is that they'd be parking in the parking lots over here and here. And then, again, it's kind of an operations thing on whether they allow parking along the road, but currently it doesn't look like it's accommodating that kind of parking along that stretch of road. Yes, another question?
Could you address if there's going to be anything in this grant that to do with lighting on the walkway up there? You have lighting down below, but it gets really dark up there and it gets early and people would like to be up there at celebrations. I don't know if that's a city issue or it can be included in the grant money to have lighting on the sculpture and for the walkway up top.
So as far as the Osmond grant, they don't like to put their money towards more infrastructure, so if it's like a lot of parking or electrical or lighting, but I think that's something that we can note as far as the master plan goes. So that I agree that if you're bringing more people in here, again, I'm not sure that, I'll have to look at the lighting situation here, I'm not sure if there's any kind of like wall packs or kind of security lighting on the restroom. I'll take a look at the existing photos and go out there again, but as a general comment, I would agree that if there's the possibility to come in and add some additional kind of security lighting. I don't know what its operations is, it's just close from dawn to dusk, is that the typical
Correct.
operations for the parks? So from that standpoint, obviously it's gonna get used a lot more in the summertime when it's light till 8:39, even later. But we'll make that note, and then that's obviously something that can be put into the plan for looking at opportunities. Should they get the grant, maybe there's some commented grants or something that with LED or even looking at solar and wind and other stuff where we might be able to look at some opportunities in the city for increased lighting. There's a,
Well, I may be off my mark here. The road that comes in, that we were just talking about parking on one side. This probably is not your purview, but is there any talk about maybe widening that? Because if somebody's parking on one side and you've got another car coming, there's really not a whole lot of room for another car coming the opposite way. And then you've got kids out there playing, and it just kind of makes me nervous. And then onto the left, my left, over here, that parking area, how many parking spaces are there? Like 12?
I'm out over here.
Yeah.
And then the other west side, yeah. There's, I think maybe 3 here, about 10, 11 maybe?
10, 11, yeah.
Where it was.
And then, yeah, I mean, this is all,
Mhm.
and then there's another, a lot.
Yep.
But this isn't gonna cover to the west, right?
Correct, so the grant portion of it,
Right.
again, is allocated more toward the recreation amenities instead of the parking, but there's some things that can be done, just like over here, that we can look at, you know, maybe there's some areas that convert to green space. The width of the roadway itself would be kind of an operations thing too. I don't have my scale with me, but I think it's a little bit wider than the typical drive, which is 24 feet. It's a little bit more generous than that. So right now it's measuring about a 30-foot width, but like you said, if people are parking, it might congest that a little bit. But currently the roadway width is fairly generous. From a 24 foot is kind of your typical drive aisle with double-sided parking. I think it's more of a matter of the operation side of things. Is if it's a problem and people are parking along there, then trying to figure out how to do that from an operation standpoint, or maybe some signage. Or if there's additional parking that's needed, let's say, you know, you find out that once this gets built and the parking's getting maxed out, then, you know, are there other areas that you would carve out some parking or allow some parallel parking? Again, that's one of those things that kind of you have to grow into once everything is in place, depending on how successful, how many people are coming down and using it. That's some good comments as far as the road goes.
Yeah, that was, looking at that, and people coming up and down the middle of that sidewalk, I noticed you have that expanded out to be 10 foot. It should be 10 foot wide, the concrete walkway. And the all, but, have been involved in some of this with sculptures up there. And it seemed to me a long time ago that there was, in order for people to access and come up, if they didn't want to come up in on the west side, go up to the higher playground level and art level, if they're only left with 2 options. You either come in the west side or you go to the east side with people that talk about this parking. It does seem to be, makes sense to have at least parallel parking in that area just north of P there. Along there, what is that, you had that park at some sort of.
Yes, you're talking about along this
Right
side?
there, yeah. It just makes logical sense because people, if they want to go up to the playground, they don't want to go all the way to the west, they have an option right there to access and go up. Easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think all these are great comments, and I think we can take these, and these are gonna be noted. Definitely, if you get a chance to write that on a comment card as well. Again, I think it's getting recorded, but it'd be great if you have a chance to come in and add some of those comments on the comment cards. I do agree a little bit, you have, you know, this area here, this is the parking, this is the parking, so maybe exploring the idea in the future, you know, parallel, maybe some additional parking might be something that should be explored. Yes, question in the back?
In the past, we've tried to do Allen Park as like incorporated with all the other activities in Ottawa, as far as Ottawa and blooming with flower gardens. It's a beautiful place to do flowers up there on top, that upper level. And I see now maybe the opportunity, the only 2 accesses for water to get up there on that top level is from that bathroom key. And there's another bathroom that's just west of, you go over there. And you have to drag 200 feet of hose. And I've done it many, many times, not a lot of fun. And I see with all the playground equipment up there, you may not want hoses dragging up there. Is there something to consider? Might be a good time to try to get water access up there.
That's a great point. And then imagine, I'm not sure if there's an external hose bib on outside of this building, but obviously there's water service
Yeah,
there.
there is.
I'm guessing there is a
It's a long way up.
There's a little bit, but yeah, but like you said, with some of the plantings and stuff here, one thing that we can look at is the idea of a quick coupler or like yard hydrant or something that might be able to be extended.
Yes.
So depending on the size of the water line that's servicing this restroom here. And certainly when this gets put in, at a minimum, at least making sure there's some sleeves or something so that you're not having to tear out kind of the new carpet, so to speak. But I think it's a great comment, is to make sure that we're considering future utilities and water service for maintaining. You are gonna do some native plantings, or the idea of some of the, blooming perennials that might help attract people here, teach them about natives as well. Again, we're not always talking about petunias, but maybe it's black-eyed Susans and some purple coneflower, or some of those flowers that attract butterflies, and it starts to teach a little bit about the native plantings that are out there in the wildlife. Yes?
I just had a question, maybe I missed it. You were talking about the, all the way over on W, like an observation thing, and that's where yellow has its observation and signage right now. Okay, what about the one for the signage for red or bending that also has a flagstone pavers, which I know are not real effective? Is that still gonna be an observation area overlooking red, which was the original plan?
Yeah, I think, so we have some relocated benches here, and then this is kind of the bench swing, but I think what we can do is similar to this area as far as overlooking the sculpture. We can carve out an area near the bench swings just offset in order to kind of have a pause point to be able to come in and do
That's where
it.
that signage is that
Exactly.
reflects directly to that one, so that would still be an open area.
Yeah, we can definitely incorporate it in the plan, so originally I think we had it kind of close to here, but we'll look at where that original location is with the flagstone and make sure that we have kind of an interpretive opportunity for that sculpture as well, and it's something that we can refine on the plan.
Thank you.
Great questions and comments. What other questions, any other comments, questions, or thoughts or ideas that you like, or things that you might like to see?
Is there any plans to get rid of the old bathroom or the concrete down there? It's kind of an eyesore.
Is that-
It's nice work,
Here?
yeah. And there's like, there used to be like an old stage farther down, like right below C.
Right, have tuck
Right
back
down
in,
there,
and here.
like where the old playground was.
Yeah, so this is the whole playground. Yeah, there's this, yeah, exactly, there's a stage here, and then I think that might be a question for the city as well. I mean, as far as the cost from a grant standpoint, that probably wouldn't fit into the grant, but it's something that, Tammy or others, but the city can consider as far as, future allocation. Yes.
Is there money in this grant for any type of publicity, for tourism, for brochures, for flyers? Or does that come more on the city side of things once you're done?
Probably more on city or businesses and other stuff that would help contribute to that. Interpretive signage is part of that, so one thing that the DNR likes to see is promoting environmental education and environmental stewardship, best practices. So, again, choosing native plants that have the longer root systems, pollinator garden plants, but also interpreting some of the history of the site is part of that too. So I think if we can weave in as part of the narrative for the grant too, that we're looking at this from a sustainable practice way. But I think they also like the fact that we've looked at the site context and that we are enhancing the interpretation that's already there, because obviously with the sculptures and the bridge, there's a lot of history. But we want to bring in the idea of kind of the mineral springs and some of the bridge components and have that as one of the interpretive opportunities. So part of the grant too is that we might budget for one or two interpretive signs. One might be more toward the history, and then another one is towards the environmental education and the idea of pollinator garden, or again, to be determined a little bit, but more of that environmental side of society in our looks favorably upon.
Thank you. And then last question, you have some really nice boards over here of fun kids stuff to the left over here. That looks pretty exciting also there.
Yeah,
Those
maybe there's,
ideas for,
Yeah, so there's a PDF, we'll go over that real quick here too, and then we can take a couple more questions, and then if we want, we can head up and look at a few of the boards, but I'll go over this a little bit more detail, and then these are also up here on the boards. So we're at the very early stages of kind of looking at the playground equipment, and we like to come in with kind of some light theming. And so part of that is the idea of the Illinois River and the flow, that kids will flow through this space. And so they flow through, climbing and sliding and spinning and jumping, large gross motor skills. But also we want to cater to those that, some sensory experience as well, some protected spaces where they can get out of the hustle and bustle of some of the play experiences. So one thing that we really like is the idea of that there's some grade change here, because we're up on the hillside near the steps of the restroom, looking at ways we might be able to incorporate some double embankment slides. 2 slides encourage cooperative play, where you're kind of side by side, so even a wider slide or a double bank type slide. Opportunities for scrambling, so this would be the port and place rubberized surfacing that would be almost like peeling back the landscape, where you have some moguls and some hills that you can scramble up, you can roll down, you can run up and down, even integrating some changes in elevation with some half spheres. This is an example of some of these play loops that even the undulation of a climber can mimic kind of the waves or the wake of a boat or anything like that. It's something that's related to, again, to the river. Different slide types, potentially a roller slide might be an option, or traditional slides, straight slides, curved slides. Again, looking at some of the ideas for some crawl tunnels and some moguls. This is a little bit more of a natural take on it. This is at the Morton Arboretum Children's Garden, but more of kind of a root slide that might be coming down off to the side. And then opportunities talking about bridges that through the grade change here, some of these net climbers can come down almost like a waterfall, so that you can climb up from one level to the next, or even having this bridge effect where you're able to climb over from one to the next, again, kind of connecting to the idea of the bridges that are out there. Again, the waveform. The playground industry is kind of not going away from posted deck systems, but kind of more freeform. So the idea is that you have a larger capacity of being able to have lower levels, some net climbers, some perch points when you get up to the top. So we're looking at some different options for some of these shapes that would have a higher capacity for climbing, jumping, playing games. We all kind of make up games as we go into the playgrounds, which hopefully kids are still doing that. I haven't done that in a while with my daughters in college, but the whole lava or tag or, I don't even know what games they're playing now. But the idea is that trying to get them to kind of unplug. And I think what's important now is that we live in a time of technology. We want to incorporate that to some degree, but also give them a place where they can put down the smartphones and just be able to interact with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different economic status. Just all different types of things where they're all together and can learn to play together inclusively. Again, these are just ideas. We're wanting to get your feedback on if you like certain types of equipment. Even as you're on here with your sheets, feel free to say, I like the idea of this image or these type of things. And let's go to the next slide. Part of that might be a little bit more natural. This has a triglycite in it, so the idea of some fossils that might be along the river or the different type of river rock that might be underneath. There's some boulder climbing, spinning. The idea of, again, the waveform where you have some individual spinners, using some net climbers, some rope climbers on that. Even the swings themselves, a group swing that might you'll be able to have an older sibling and a younger sibling, or even an adult and a kid that may not have as much upper body strength. You can see that there's like 4 kids on this one, so looking at opportunities for some of these different type of swinging applications. Then also, again, kind of some modular structures where you have the opportunity to navigate through. Let's go to the next one. The game table area we're looking at, again, it can be round or square, but the idea of some game tables that would have a checkerboard patterns on them, beanbag toss games where you can come in and associate those kind of next to the shelters, so that if you're renting a shelter at a family event or just even with the family, you can come out and play with some of the game courts. One thing that we're exploring is the fitness stations. You have an idea of doing some fitness stations, which is more about working different muscle groups. So, whether it's upper body, abdominals, or hitting the different muscle groups, which is kind of more of these type of applications. We are seeing a little bit more of kind of fitness circuits where you have different stations that you can do. Again, This would be take a little bit bigger footprint, but you'd have, 6 or 7 different activities you can do within that. And then lastly, we're showing kind of a challenge fitness course, is that there might be an opportunity to do something. This is going to be maybe geared towards, teenagers and others as far as kind of timing of going through this course and coming back through it. It takes a little bit larger footprint. We're still exploring these options, but if there's certain preferences, as far as the type of style that you would prefer or you think people would use in the community, we're here to get some input kind of on preferences in regards to the fitness stations as well. And then lastly, we talked about the areas. You can see here the bench swing. I think this is a great opportunity to have a few of these located at that upper level area, where you can come in and pause and stop and look at the Illinois River or some of the sculptures and the awesome, the bridge architecture that comes in across the Illinois River. And then up at the top, kind of mimicking some of the structure components, this would be the shelter up the top of the playground. A little bit more, well, industrial is the right word, but the architecture of the bridges with kind of more your I-beams and your cross braces fits within kind of the architectural style. So coming in with those kind of ideas. This one has some cutouts to where it comes in and actually provides some inverse shadows on the ground. So we may be able to look at the actual perforations of the shelter itself and have that as kind of an artistic expression, which we could go with kind of the artwork of the sculpture. Some economical ways to incorporate some leaf imprints or even talk a little bit about nature. This is also a wildlife corridor along the river, so if we want to interpret the idea of, even though red-tailed hawks are quite numerous now, but the idea of raptors and waders and birds, we can talk about blue heron, we can talk about lots of different wildlife. So I think we don't want to forget that aspect of it, that this is also a wildlife corridor, and how do we interpret that through play. Stained concrete, again, we're not proposing this, but we can look at different ways to do like a silhouette of a hawk flying over, or a different type of artistic expression within some of these areas within the playground, so that when they're playing, they can follow, a blue heron footprints, or duck footprints, or a raccoon footprints, or whatever that might be, to start to look at the context of where they live and what they might find. Then lastly, corporate grills. Obviously, we're familiar with this, but the idea here is that on the overlook, we're taking the same type of stone and creating a seat wall, again, using that similar material, which really makes it congruent and start to read as a whole from a park standpoint, that we're repeating some of the same materials and vernacular. And then the council ring, options for doing kind of more of the stone here, but it also could be in some of the areas near the playground using some larger boulders integrated with benches with backs, because we want to be able to have armrests and be able to get in and out. So different seating types for ADA accessibility, but also options near the playground that might be an option for people to sit on the boulder next to the playground, or this becomes also a table for kids for loose sparks play if they're collecting seeds and nuts and other stuff. It becomes kind of a multi-purpose area as well. So again, these are all just initial ideas for this section. There's some great questions so far. We're at 8 o'clock. We have again, we can stay as long as needed, but I have another half an hour, not that you have to stay that long. But I'm going to open it up to maybe a few more questions, and then I encourage you to also kind of get up and be able to look at some of the board as well. James, you have any questions?
First off, thanks for coming tonight, Andy. I enjoyed looking at some of the different opportunities that Allen Park may have maybe too entertaining. I think one of the key components there is the natural topography that we have in that southern slope, and I think that really lends itself to a very attractive site for a really nice embankment slide coming down that I think would be a really nice amenity in that area. Also, too, historically, Allen Park has been for years, has had numerous sets of swings down there. And your typical to and fro swings. In the proposal, kind of looking at things preliminary now, I didn't really see a footprint of traditional swings that are in there, and I think that might be an important key factor for in there.
Okay.
I know up on top we are limited a little bit with space and what we can have in there, and obviously swings do take up a larger footprint, but I think that'd be a nice component and a nice amenity to have in there with the playground too. So.
Those are great comments. Swings are kind of the number one thing that a lot of kids like to do. Belt swings, the top swings for the 2 to 5 or the younger top area. So we'll look at that. The other swing is just kind of an idea of kind of the dish swing, but I think we want to make sure that we're looking at incorporating some traditional swings in there as well. We'll have to see how that fits within the space. I know the playground was kind of down near the shelter within the floodplain, but not the floodway. But if we're getting a little bit strapped, maybe we have some swings there, but we could also, not that we want to separate them that much, but we may have an opportunity to put those in another location near there, and just recognize that, we'll have some flooding, but swings are gonna require a lot less maintenance than, a large playground or GFRC sculpture thing.
Yeah.
So definitely note taken, and we'll look at, traditional swings and see how that might fit within the plan.
And if we can go back to the plan view for a second, not grant related, yeah, this plan exactly here, and I know we were talking about parking and, whether this is gonna become more of a destination park. And with the existing shelters that we do have on site, which are shown as, on the south side, which is D, 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 and D,
Yeah.
and obviously, we've got some shelters and pavilions that are on the north side too. I know historically, from years driving down to the park, there'd be people parked on one side of the road, there'd be people parked on the other side of the road, there'd be people parked on both sides of the road, you could barely get one car through there. Basically, you've kind of got these 3 H's here, which I think might be your ADA accessible routes crossing the roadway. And I think on those straightaways on the south side of the road, probably be really good opportunities to do parallel parking on those straightaways to provide some parking, which will also let people park a little bit closer for unloading those goods to their picnic and their coolers to some of the existing shelters that are there. Yeah, basically from like H to H, they're parallel on the straightaway. And then also to the west with the H there, and I think on some of those straightaways would be good. I wouldn't encourage the parking on the, say, on the corners and some of those areas in between where some of the curves are.
Here's the sight line and stuff.
Yeah, with your sight lines and stuff, but I think that south portion would be some very good opportunities for parallel parking for people to unload, to take their coolers to the different pavilions versus parking and competing with the boat trailers coming out of the boat ramps where they're trying to park, and then the parking off to the left. That's a relatively decent distance to be trying to travel, especially if one of the lots are full and you're doing a picnic at the pavilion there next to the restroom as E, and all the parking's full there, and you have to park way down at the west end at A. It'd be nice to have a couple of parallel parking spots in there, and I believe we're in the process of looking at repaving down there, I think, right now.
For sure.
And maybe that's something possibly looking at, Tom, to maybe moving some curbs in there to get 9 foot in there for some parallel parking possibly. I don't know what kind of condition those curbs are, or if they're up for any replacement, but it would be nice, to get 8 or 9 parallel parking spots, on the west side, and then 8 or 9 on the east side too, would be nice to accommodate another 20 parking stalls would be nice, so.
Surprisingly, the curbs are in pretty good shape.
Great comments. I think that's something we can look into, incorporating into the plan and looking at opportunities. May not be funded through OSLA, but, as a master plan standpoint, having them see that there's some, parking plan close to some of the amenities, so you can have closer ADA access that might be look favorable upon. So we'll explore an idea of maybe some parallel parking that might get those a little bit closer to the shelters.
I figured that would be the time if we're gonna propose for the grant, if we're gonna be paving the roadway down there, that would be the time to do it, so.
We don't really want to put that in the grant, though.
Paving's not in the grant.
No, that wouldn't.
No, yeah, I mean, a lot of times, sometimes you'll have kind of the master plan, and then you have a phase 1 where you're showing that the planning efforts are that there may be some future parallel parking there, but it would not obviously be in the cost, site development cost or stuff here. Great comments.
I'm sorry, just one last thing before you finish. Maybe I missed it, but there's a lot of open green space if you go to the right of O and above I and that there. And I realize that floods, but that's also a really cool play area. It used to be where the tennis courts, if I remember right, maybe, were. Is there something that might be sturdy in your things that you're also putting farther down as you come down the hill to the right to that playground? Maybe there's a couple playground items that are pretty sturdy and can handle just being washed off, after the flood goes down every now and then. It just looks awful open green space, and yet you might be a little jammed down towards the shelter.
So that's a great comment. I think, again, here's a floodplain, but like you said, there may be an opportunity for a few
Just a few
pieces, possibly. I think that's where we're, we're looking at swings and other stuff. And
Yeah.
again, that could be a future phase. We want to make sure that we're, fitting within the budget as far as what they're asking for the 50/50 match program. But,
We have not, of course, picked out any treatment because, again, this is preliminary. But if you come up and look at, the charts up here, one of the pictures we thought about incorporating were, the concrete canoes, just like the concrete clay equipment, knowing that we could just split it off, and that's why those are positioned where they are. But, yeah, we can talk about that too.
Those were on an earlier slide, but they were right away up at the top.
yeah, so.
I liked those were, right there.
Right there.
So this is port in place surfacing with some small mobiles, and then these are representative of kind of, birch bark or type canoes, or again, more of a pretend play type element. So that's something that we can consider. It doesn't fit with a certain area, maybe it is, in a lower area as well, that can take some of the flooding. Good comments.
Thank you.
I know we got about another 20 minutes here, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Again, I can take another question, or if you want, definitely come up, talk with us. Feel free to look at the boards. We really want to hear your comments, so we're here to really get your inputs. If you have any ideas on certain things that you like that are in the plan or that aren't in the plan, or some of the ideas on preferences of some of the comp images, we are going to package this up and kind of make some refinements of the concept plan. We'll probably consolidate these into a couple, maybe 2 boards as far as the comp images or character images. Again, not totally tied to that, but any kind of input that you have would be helpful to say that we like to make it play, or we like this type of feature, or the swing comment, things like that. We're here to gather that input and then refine the plan before it goes out to the grant. And again, September 29th is when the grant cycle, where all the grants need to come in. It's anyone's guess as far as when they're going to announce it, but it's going to take some while. With 56 million in the bucket, there's going to be probably quite a few grants being submitted. But typically, it's at least probably like 9 months, 6 to 9 months plus before they'll even announce the grant. So from the timing of when the improvements would go in, if they get the grant, that's definitely a good, year and a half plus out before you potentially start construction. So, but it is a great program, and we're glad that they upped it finally to 1.2, where it was only 800 before. It's been like that for 50 plus years, and it's been overdue kind of to increase the amount of funding that they're able to do the 50/50 match. So with that, I'll just open it up to.
I do want to thank everyone for coming. As all of you know, we had this grant for Thornton Park, which we did have some hiccups, and that was completely different because we basically had a blank canvas. Allen Park, we have to take a lot more things into consideration. So thank you for being here tonight, and all your opinions are appreciated and welcome, and I hope that we receive the grant. Let's do it.
I appreciate everyone being here and the city promoting this process, but especially your time, because through the community, we want to hear your thoughts, and we're really excited about submitting this grant. It's a beautiful park site, as everyone knows. It's got steeped in history, and it's really a great space for families, from 0 to 101 to be able to recreate. So feel free to come on up, look at these photos, ask us any questions along the way. Definitely sign in if you haven't. The more people we have signed in, and then you can fill out, even if it's just a few bullet points on the comment cards, we really would love to see those. If you just want to leave those at the table, or we can take them as well, if you'd rather. So again, appreciate all the time.
And I think, just so everybody knows, we did get 4 or 5 emails with some suggestions. The meeting was live streamed tonight, so if anybody does want to send something in by email, they have that opportunity. You should be able to go online and watch. I don't know how good the sound will show up But it should be pretty good with Andy, who had a microphone.
Thanks, Mayor.
Any way we can authorize or something, we can say that the city, let them use the extra 20 feet of the expansion.
But in this case, they come from the outside. They don't know that New York City is going to do that. I don't know.